Okay. So let's start with meditation, which is something that I began, man, probably about 10 years ago at this point. And it really, for me, I get asked a lot to help people with meditation, and I do. And I typically focus on their breath to get them started. But for me, it was such a journey and really a science project. I like reading biographies about successful people, their process, how they started, in one place and got to the pinnacle of whatever they're doing, whether it's an athlete, whether it's whoever, a scientist, an entrepreneur, businessman, everything in between. I'd like to understand people's processes, their motivations. I just find it interesting. And one common thread that I found with people that I admire was the fact that many of them meditated and many of them would talk about how it changed their life. And just there's so many anecdotal stories about how meditation helps someone. For me, there are different types of anxieties. Some people dwell on the past, some people dwell on the future, different things in those realms. Mine was always looking into the future. And when you're in the present moment, you can't control the future. All you could do is control where you are at that moment, what you focus on, what you allow yourself to focus on. So it was a science project, and I'm like, I want to meditate. So I the first well, and before I got to that point, I actually read a book, which was, I'm not an Oprah guy, but Oprah Winfrey used to have on her show like a book that she would recommend. I don't know what it was called, like Oprah's book recommendation, whatever it was. And the thing that started that was Oprah read a book called The Untethered Soul by a guy named Mickey Singer. No relation to me, Michael Singer, but I think that his nickname is Mickey. And Mickey talks about his journey and when he started to meditate, all of the noise that was going on in your head. And he talked about it, and it made sense to me. I also then read a book called Sapiens, and in Sapiens, when they talk about the history of the world, the history of from the beginning to now, the happiest people ever were, the happiest people, the happiest time for people was when we were hunter gatherers, and the healthiest was when we were hunter gatherers. And there was a lot of different reasons for that, but one of the reasons is they knew exactly what their job was. I mean, their job was survival, right? So when that is your job and you know what your purpose is to survive, not only for you to survive, make sure your kids and your wife survives. Uh, you don't have time to dwell on other things. You know what your purpose is, and it's actually a very, people who have a purpose are the happiest. And they were the healthiest because they moved around a lot. They had a variation of food. They weren't, it wasn't the agricultural revolution yet, so they weren't just growing one crop. There was no wars because people didn't have territory. I mean, maybe there was fights, when people ran into each other, but no real war. And so this was the happiest time, and they were present. They weren't dwelling on the future because their future was, when is my, or do we have something to eat right now? Like that's was their reality. So they didn't, that was just who they were. So that interests me too. How do you get present? So I started to meditate. And at first, I was amazed because one thing that they talk about, Mickey Singer talks about in The Untethered Soul, is the things that you get used to, the voices, the conversations going on in your head. What she just said? What is it? What did she mean by that? Was that a sideways comment to me, or how come they looked at me that way? Like all these, or I should be doing this instead of I'm here, but I should be there, and all these things are just noise that, like, it's an overactive ego. You're not controlling the narrative in your brain. Some other rogue thing is, okay. And so what meditation does is it quiets those voices, and you focus on your breath, in through your nose, out through your mouth, in through your nose, out through your mouth. And I'll talk about oxygenating your body in another session because I do that as well. I do a lot of breath work. But when you meditate, the reason why everyone's like, I can't meditate, my brain wanders. Well, of course it wanders. I mean, our minds are organs in our body that have evolved over, how many millions of years. Okay. You're not going to just say, oh, I want to shut it off. You're not going to shut it. It's like saying, I could shut off my kidney if I want. You can't do that. But what you can do is strengthen a muscle that when you focus on your breath in through your nose, out through your mouth, and you keep bringing your focus back to your breath, what you're doing is strengthening a muscle to focus on what you want to focus on. Okay. So if I'm breathing and something else pops into my head, I don't want to focus on you right now. And over time, it becomes like a steel curtain. So, this is great. And so when you don't control those voices in your mind, it's an energy stealer. Okay. You start worrying about this and worrying about that. If I don't do this, then what happens? All that is a waste of time. It's a misuse of the imagination. So that takes energy. And so a lot of times when people have a lot of chatter in their head, they get to, oh, I'm exhausted, well, that's why. So what, you get your body in an optimal position to focus, and so I wake up in the morning, first thing I do is meditate, and then I typically meditate again or right after lunch. And you could feel those things coming back in, some anxiety, and that's when I typically it's time to meditate. As soon as I meditate, my God, I'm present and I'm more efficient. Instead of like, oh my God, I have 10 things and just staring, I'll attack one. I'll finish it, and then I'll attack two, and then I'll finish. Like, it just gets you into that state. So it really better than a cup of coffee. A hack at work, meditate. Trust me. And if you don't know where to begin, the only way to begin is to begin. Take 5 breaths today. That's your homework. 5 breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth. Okay. So that's what I'll say about meditation for now. I could talk about this for hours, as you probably figured out.